Have you ever wondered how addiction becomes more than an individual struggle, seeping into the very fabric of a family life? How does addiction impact not just individuals, but their entire families? What does it truly mean to support a family member through addiction? And how can someone supporting a loved one through addiction navigate the struggles, the silent battles, and the triumphs? How can they stay resilient without enabling the addiction of their loved one? Join me after the intro for a conversation with a very special friend with whom we will answer these and many more questions. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's start. Hi, I'm Rossana D, and this is Forgive and Thrive, a podcast where we explore what thriving in life means and how we can achieve it, irrespective of our past, current condition, and expectations that those around us or society in general may have. Let's go. Welcome to the Forgive and Thrive show. Addiction is a silent intruder that can sneak into anybody's life. It's like a subtle, deceptive, powerful force that makes itself at home in our life and manages to entangle itself in the everyday moments we hold dear. We have often talked about addiction in the show because it's often the tragic response we have to situations we don't really know how to deal with. But we have often discussed its challenges from the perspective of those who fell into an addiction trap and raised back from it. And rightly so, I should say. But in those journeys, there are people that are often forgotten. They are the parents, the siblings, the partners, the children, and everyone else who deeply care for those fighting addiction and who carry part of its heavy weight. So today we delve into a topic that hits close to home for many, families grappling with addiction. It's a conversation that often unfolds behind closed doors, obscured by layers of stigma, shame, and the weight of unspoken struggles. But no more. Today, we pull back those curtains and invite you into a space of understanding and compassion and discuss about the crucial role that families have in the addiction recovery journey of a loved one, how they can support them without enabling their addiction, but also how they can build up their resilience. And we dive into this very important topic in a conversation with today's guest, Melissa Hiemann. Melissa is the co-founder and director of the Center for Healing, an online education company that provides transformative learning experiences for individuals seeking personal and professional development. Melissa is a therapist and coach who specializes in helping practitioners, therapists, healers, and coaches learn life-changing, transformative methods while creating a thriving business for themselves. She is also the creator of root cause therapy, a powerful method that addresses the underlying causes of addiction and mental health issues. And she also authored a book, The Natural High, a book that shares her personal journey of overcoming addiction and finding her purpose. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the Forgive and Try show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Fantastic. Well, as I said, we have talked about addiction many times in this show, but always from one perspective. So I'm really excited today to share a little bit of the journey of those around, those fighting with addiction. But before going into that, I would like to start with you. And today, obviously, you are, as I said, the founder and director of the Center for Healing. But I seem to understand that you also had some journey to do and some problems with the addiction. So how was your journey out of it and into the life you have today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to share my story and in a hope that it will inspire others. I kind of grew up in kind of a broken home. There was divorce. There was both of my step parents are narcissists, and I was a quiet, sweet little girl.
You still are, if I may.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I found her again. I reconnected with her eventually. Thank you. So I had a lot of undealt with emotions, and I was watching domestic violence and, my step parents having addictions, and even my parents on some level as well. And then, so I didn't really feel safe in either home. And I also went to school and I was bullied and I was alone for most of school. So there was nowhere that felt really safe and like I could open up. And I think that generation, like there wasn't much like, how are you feeling? And like, what's going on at home? Why are you wagging school? It was just like, change your behavior. There was no like, what's going on? And that manifested into me just going out and partying a lot and not understanding why, but thinking it was cool from when I was 14. So I was smoking, drinking, taking recreational drugs. And I also thought that I wasn't smart and I didn't do very well at school. And I ended up changing my group of friends, found some better friends in the last years of high school, and I was able to pass, but still not great. And I went and did a diploma in international business, funny enough. Now I have an international business. All this time, like I'm still drinking so much every weekend. I'm still smoking. I was having marijuana. I was sometimes having heroin and just like just waiting for the weekend to kind of escape from my mind and my body. I didn't realize why I was doing it. It just felt good. Like I just had a relief, such a relief from it. I used to say to people smoking marijuana was like having a little holiday. Yeah, so that kind of led to, I mean, there was other parts of my life because I wasn't attached or connected with my body and my emotions. I didn't understand them. I didn't know how to process them. And so I ended up kind of sabotaging my relationships. My relationship with money wasn't good either. My relationship with my friends wasn't that deep. Like everything was quite surface level. On the outside, I looked successful, but on the inside, I was not happy, and I felt very disconnected. I was very like, why is everyone doing this to me? And in this victim mentality until one day I hit this rock bottom. And I remember sitting in my beachfront one-bedroom apartment, newly single yet again, with my sports car, looking out on the ocean and thinking, I cannot feel 1 ounce of happiness. Like I am so miserable. I was chain smoking. I was heartbroken. I was like, I think I need to ask for help. I think I and I had a mutual friend that said, "Oh, our friend's a life coach or blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Oh, I'll just call him and ask him for some advice." Um, and I ended up going to have a session, and in that session, it was incredible because I started to explore my past about and my suppressed emotions and why I was sabotaging my relationships and why I wasn't connected with myself. And I walked out of there and my eyes had opened. Like I had awakened to, oh, the past isn't just in the past, it plays out in your body now. You know, the relationships that you see growing up, you keep recreating them as an adult. You keep, dating, people that remind you of your narcissistic stepdad, like that you weren't even conscious of. And so that was like a real awakening moment. And I decided to study with him and I got certified and then I resigned from my job 2 weeks later. So that was 2014. And that's how my journey started. And I was driven to try and heal my addictions. I was so driven to work on myself. And then when I was in that course halfway through, I'm like, wow, I'm meant to actually help others get out of their own way too. So that was the start of my journey, Rosanna.
Well, it is quite a journey. And what I like about it is that has nothing to do with the addiction per se. Addiction was just a way to escape. The root cause of the problem, to use your words, were in the relationships that really affected you. And I think a lot of people can really feel that they might be in the same situation. And on that, who was in your corner? So you mentioned this friend and therapist that basically took you out of that journey, but who else was in your corner then?
Mhm. Well, funny enough, I had several groups of friends that were kind of enablers and they were not the best people to be around, but I didn't realize because I was just scared to be alone and I didn't realize it was from my childhood trauma. So I was like, whoever's going to validate me and accept me or has drugs, I will hang around them, you know? And so when I got really into that journey, I remember all like I don't think I read a book in school. Like I would avoid it. I had piles of books. I couldn't stop reading. I couldn't stop learning. Like the journey threw me into, oh my gosh, I am actually really intelligent. I was just disassociated because I didn't feel safe growing up. And so all of a sudden, those contacts with those people naturally melted away. And yes, some of them got upset, but I just didn't resonate with them anymore because they were on that same vibration or the same frequency of my old life. And as I went on my personal development journey, for example, I would sit there and I couldn't converse with them in the same way that I used to. I don't know if any of you have had that experience where you're like, I can't even relate to these people anymore. And it's not in a I'm better than anyone way by any means like that. It just means you've shifted things inside where you don't resonate anymore. So I actually let go of a lot of people, and some of them were some of my really good friends for over a decade. So the relationship that who was by my side, I started being on my side. And I started learning to reconnect with myself and have a new relationship with the most important person in my life that was me, that previously I was putting last. And so that was who started having my back, if that makes sense. That's who was there and who will always consistently be there with you. And that's one of the most important relationships that comes first.
Absolutely, and it's something that personally I can relate with that because I had a burnout 5 years ago, and a lot of people that I thought were like brothers and sisters uh, just made the way out, and that's the reality of it. You get to a point where they are not. And as you said, it's not I'm better than them or they are better than me. We are just in different situations in life. So it's natural development out of a growth of one of the parties. So going back to the topic, the main topic, how does addiction impact the dynamics in a family life? I mean, you started with your family that was a little bit dysfunctional. That might not always be the case. And sometimes these dynamics can be enabling of the addiction. Sometimes the whole dynamics goes upside down and the parents stop, or the siblings, the partners stop relationship just for the sake of that person. So can we describe a little bit what are the general ways these dynamics can develop and occur?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's so many different scenarios and circumstances. And certainly, when we had our outpatient addiction clinic for 5 years, we saw a lot of different, people come in. There was some families that were very supportive and they were like willing to open up what needed to be opened up, including themselves, and to look at it as in my child, even if it's adult child, is in pain. How can we be there for you? And in those families, yes, it could have been a very obviously everyone does their best, but it could have been quite a healthy environment where the parents never divorced and everything was quite positive. But if you go to the other extreme where, yeah, there's a lot of divorce, toxicity in the household, there's a lot of yelling, maybe there are addictions from the parents and some kind of abuse or neglect. On the other scale, sometimes those families are like quite open as well. And so it just really depends on the openness of the family. And so what happens is that usually addictions happen quietly because of the shame in the background. And so when the families discover the addiction, it shows you the degree of openness within the family. It shows you how much they've actually been talking about what has been going on. The trust that they have to actually open up to each other. With one family, they might not discover it. They just know the child is just sharing it with them straight away. Look, I'm addicted to this. Whereas other families find out 5, 10 years later, where even it's it's a family with children, and the wife has discovered there's a gambling addiction, and all of a sudden we have to sell the house and we have no money for groceries. That's been left, and that shows a communication in the family. So the dynamics is the communication, I would say, and how open or not open it is. And so discovering of the addiction is a way for us to start to look at that, to approach it from that sense, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can see there is already so much to unpack there. There are a few things that you mentioned that really caught my attention. One is when the family discovers that someone is into an addiction. So what signs people can notice sometimes, especially for families where the addiction is not really a problem. They are not into addiction. Sometimes they can miss all the signs of that addiction. The other is the communication. So how can, if there is an open communication, then perhaps it's easy to talk and sit down and say, okay, let's talk about it. But if that open communication, open channel is not there, how do you initiate the conversation? And then there is the stigma, the silence. We have to sort out this without closed doors, with our walls, because the world outside can just judge. So there is so much. Can we start,
Yes.
for example, with the signs? How can
Yes.
family members recognize that there is an addiction?
Yes, of course. So I guess that can be a really pivotal moment and a shocking moment for a lot of families. And some of the signs you could look out for are isolation, hiding things, mood swings. Like you said at the start, it can create a lot of shame. And obviously, if people are doing something that they know is not acceptable, they're going to hide it. And shame, the expression of shame, is literally, imagine you're walking down the street and someone cannot look you in the eye. They're at the table with you, they can't look you in the eye. They've got the hoodie on, they got the eyes down to the ground because of their shame, their contraction. So if it's a loved one that normally will chat to you every Sunday, or you catch up, at least a couple of times a week, and then all of a sudden you can't get through to them, you're not hearing from them for a few weeks. The other one is obviously when it comes to enabling, asking for money and things like that, which doesn't always represent an addiction. I'm not saying if someone asks for money that they have an addiction, but if you start adding up the signs, if they start to look quite gaunt and not healthy, and you're not aware of any physical issues, being secretive with their phone, being, when I say secretive, maybe you're their partner and you go to look at their phone and they have a strong reaction like, no, don't look at my phone. And there's like an anger and a protection there. Or they're a bit secretive about, all of a sudden they're going out 3 nights a week and they're not telling you where they're going. So these kind of things are signs where they're not communicating with you, where they're not sharing, where they're retracting and going in. And then you can start to pick up, okay, I think something else is going on here. And obviously, calls to weird numbers or money going missing and things like that are signs as well, depending on which addiction we're looking at.
So when you start noticing all these signs, then how do you approach the very first conversation?
So, I mean, it's if they have an addiction and they haven't shared it with you, communication may be an issue. And so educating yourself on being able to have a conversation which may turn into a conflict. I know a lot of people try to avoid conflict, but out of love for them and just wanting to have trust and respect in the relationship, you want to start to go, okay, this might be a very uncomfortable conversation, but I'm just going to start with asking them, right? And so whether they say yes or no, you need to keep in mind that you may be wrong, give them the benefit of the doubt, and people will tell you in their own time. We're not to force it out of people. The main underlying cause, and if you keep this in mind, it will be very important. The main underlying cause of addictions is pain that they don't know how to deal with emotionally, which you may have chatted about in your previous podcast. So a question would be, whether you find out or not, is what's going on for you right now? Like, how have you been feeling? Are you hurting in any way? You know, and speaking to the root cause of it rather than speaking to how they're coping with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think there is a big journey in that the families have to do to get to that point very often, because I would argue that the first reaction is really, there is a problem, let's solve this problem. And the problem is the addiction. Well, the addiction is perhaps just a response to something else. So thank you very much for stressing that point. How can then family, stay supportive without enabling the addiction? Because I think sometimes people, when they fall into an addiction, they would do anything just to continue with that until they make that decision, until they get to the point where they say, I cannot continue like this, right? And in that phase, initial phase, they can perhaps be a little bit manipulative, perhaps, and change the situations in a way that works for them and for that addiction. Am
Yes.
I going off track here?
No, and I want to go back to remembering that their addiction is a solution, and that of course they may get defensive initially because you're taking away something from them that makes them feel okay, and everyone just wants to feel okay. And so what can happen is, in the family dynamic, is that once they find out, they want to quickly get the addict to get some help, stop using or stop doing what they're doing. And this might sound weird, but it is to make themselves feel better, whether it's causing them direct issues in the family, or whether it's shame from their community that the family doesn't want to have to face, or for anyone else to know. So they quickly get the addict to recover and stop. They will feel better, but they need to remember that the addict has a solution to feel better. They don't know any other solution right now. And so we need to approach it with that lens of like, okay, this is your current solution. What can we do so your solution doesn't cause so much harm to you and your, whether they have their own family or whatever. I think that's the best way to approach it again. And I think that the family needs to start to be open to, yes, this person is experiencing an issue at the moment, but they are not the problem of the whole family. The whole family, the dynamic of the family, everyone has to look at themselves as well and be open to looking at the whole dynamic. So that's just an expression of that, like that person's taken on everything from everyone and expressing the toxicity in the family, perhaps. And how can they look at themselves and see what they can work on as well? Have it to be an awakening for them as well of, how is our family dynamic? How is our communication? How do we deal with emotions? What did this child see growing up within our family? Did they go through something traumatic and we told them to stop crying and forgetting about it? How many things have we pushed under the rug here that we're not willing to look at? And then the other thing is, there's a comparison. Like, how come your two siblings, they're doctors or whatever, they don't have addictions? Every child has a different relationship with the same parent because every child triggers different things. And sometimes there's a scapegoat or a black sheep in a family, which again can become the addict because they always looked at something's wrong with you rather than I see your individuality. So I hope I haven't gone too off track there, but I just want to really like hone in on the family dynamic. Is there's so many factors involved, but that is key for the family not to go, there's just something wrong with you, and just point fingers, and to be willing to do some work themselves.
I absolutely love what you're saying here. And you have come already to describe some of the challenges that families can have and face while supporting a loved one. What are the other common challenges?
Mhm. Well, the next steps are, okay, someone has an addiction. Well, how can I help them? How can, that's probably the main question that people have. Like, I found out they have an addiction. Okay, I'm listening to Melissa. I'm open to doing some work on myself and to look at our family dynamics, to look at us as a whole. Now, but how, like, I still want to help them. I don't just want to enable them or let them go or like just not help them, right? I do want to support them in some way. How can I best support them or help them with the next step? Well, you just being there and being open and saying, I'm here to support you. And when you are ready, I will help you to recover or be on this journey of recovery. Right. And so the first step with that is educating yourself, right? What is available? What can they do? Is it rehab? Is it therapy? The addiction they're dealing with, is it that particular drug? Can I do some research on that without looking at the news? Because the news just gives us the highlights, because we specialized in methamphetamine addiction, ice addiction. The first thing people were like, oh, were you scared? Like, we never had anyone rage. We had no issues. The only issue, we had some people falling asleep because they've been awake for 4 days straight. And I was like waking them up to have therapy. But other than that, if they're coming for help, like it makes people feel better. Drugs make people feel better. So it's just when they stop using that they can, anyone's grumpy when they're tired, right? And so educating yourself on in the background on, seeing what are withdrawals like so you don't freak out. We've got to calm down a little bit, get the fear. That I always say that understanding takes away the fear. The energy that you approach them with is very important. If you approach them with, I'm guilting them, why won't you change for me? You have to stop this, you're going to die. Of course, someone's going to be defensive and say no and not be open to asking you for help or for getting help. The energy needs to shift into curiosity, love, support, getting educated. So you're not in that fear, crazy state. That's got to be your goal. And so then approaching them with that energy and saying, look, these are the options that I found. Or do you want to look some up? I'm happy to support you. And then I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but then the next steps would be what you need to really think about, even if you need to take a whole week to think about this, because you don't want to enable them. What are your boundaries going to be? Because if they've been asking you for money like every month and they were saying all different reasons and now you know why, are you going to decide and tell them, I'm not going to give you cash anymore? If you want to go get therapy, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for your food. You can decide whether you want to pay for the roof over their head or not. You need to come up with boundaries that look after you. Do not lose yourself in this. Look after you. Create those boundaries. The boundaries are caring. And I need to add this. You will probably feel guilty creating those boundaries, but you're going to feel guilty or resentful. So you've got to, guilty is better because it's going to help them. It's kind. It's not nice. It's kind. Right? Because if you stop enabling them, then they have to look at the reasons why they're using. One of the things we used to say at the center, you don't know why you're using, just stop using for a bit and you'll discover why. And so that is something that I think people are scared to do. And, but I think it's very important.
There is something that you said here for the family, don't fall into that. And it reminded me actually of a movie that I saw when I was still in secondary school, so decades ago now. And it was the story of a father and son, the son having an addiction to drugs, heavy drugs. And the father, to understand the son, fell into the addiction himself. And obviously that was a movie. I'm not saying that it happens in reality, but from what you're saying, I think those helping need to stay cool, in one word, and try not to give into those dynamics that are not helpful. And I think that is very, very difficult to do. How can people stay resilient in that time? And keep that cool?
yes, again, getting very clear on the boundaries. But I'm just going to share with you my own personal story, and it might help put it together in people's minds where I had many addictions, not just the substances I was talking about. I also had sexual addiction because I had sexual trauma that I didn't know was affecting me. I had spending addictions as well. And so, every time I go to my dad's, he would just give me money. Like that was his showing me love. And little did he know what I was doing with the money. And he's always like, "Are you saving?" I'm like, "Yes, daddy." And I was not saving. But I remember, and then he started to get Alzheimer's, quite an older dad. But so my stepmom would sometimes I'd ask for money and things like that. And I remember one day, and it actually really helped me. She said, "Bank's closed." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "We're not giving you any more money." And I'm like, "What?" And I was like really shocked and obviously upset and hurt at the time. So this is kind of similar to addicts, right? So if something was happening that was enabling them, they're going to get upset initially. There's going to be that reaction. So be aware of that. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had to learn how to manage my money. I studied money. I worked on my relationship with money to the point now where I look 10 years back and I go, well, I was living week to week. And sometimes I didn't know how I was going to pay for my next meal. And I was buying all these flashy things and I could never save any money. To now, I've saved so much. We've got more money than we know what to do with right now. We have to get like financial people because it's something I have to continually work on and things like that. But I'm so grateful because it was enabling my shopping addiction, right? So she did that from love because she was realizing. And so I hope that me sharing that story, you can relate that because the thing is, as soon as someone in the family has an addiction that sounds bad, gambling, substances, and things like that, all of a sudden we forget our shopping addiction. All of a sudden we forget our caffeine addiction. All of a sudden we forget our eating addiction and how we emotionally soothe ourselves. That just flies out the window because they're socially acceptable. Work addiction, some people throw themselves into work and they've got the same symptoms that people have that have substance abuse of like they and isolating, not connecting with their family. They're using work to avoid their emotions. And so a part of us having empathy is seeing, hang on, this person's having this particular addiction that, yes, may be causing more harm. And I don't want to minimize how much it can disrupt families and cause harm. But where am I an addict in my life, right? Am I an addict to people pleasing and enabling? Am I an addict to shopping and buying little trinkets? Am I, it could be, we need to look at that and own that as well, to have empathy, to diffuse our strong fear and emotions and sharing that with them, that will start to open them up. So one of the reasons why our clinic was so successful in our outpatient rehab was because we were lived experience. So people could open up more because they could relate to us. So if you can find that addict in you and say, "Look, I know you've got this addiction and everything." And I was thinking, what addictions do I have? And actually I realized that A, B, and C, that might start to open up the person to trusting you more, talking about it with you more. And that is the journey to recovery, is feeling safe and starting to feel like we can talk about our emotions and be open and communicate.
Melissa, you mentioned something with addictions that are socially acceptable, being addicted to our job, our work, for example, and others that perhaps might not. So that creates sometimes a lot of stigma. And we talked before about dealing with the addiction within the house, in secrecy, having all that shame that we carry, both as addicted and family of an addicted. How do societal attitudes really shape these dynamics within families and individuals? And what can we do to reduce the stigma? Because I think stigma is the right word, isn't it?
Yes. And, what's happened in the last few years with COVID has actually, it's been very difficult and we've lost a lot of lives. But one of the good things that came out of it is people are talking about their mental health. And actually, like for us at the center, we don't separate mental health and addiction because an addiction is just a way to self medicate our mental health issues. And so, as people become more aware and open, and the stigma reduces around mental health, I think over time the stigma around addiction will reduce. But I do loop back to, the hysteria of the negativity that we see on the news and the perceptions that we get from the news or from movies or, documentaries or things like that, where we just label people as you're an addict. And I think that's changing too, even with 12-step programs and anon and things like that. It's really like, oh, you're an addict, you're always an addict, and that's the label, and shame on you, and you have to stop. And what's coming forward is that, yeah, it's just someone's just coping with their stuff. They don't have to have that label forever. And if they learn how to heal the root causes, they can naturally stop using. They don't have to label themselves as an addict anymore. I'm not really answering your question about the stigma. It's a bit hard for me just because I've been in this world for 10 years. So I don't see the stigma as much as maybe families do, but definitely the previous generations, even talking about trauma, even talking about mental health. This has all been quite new, that it's quite mainstream now. I was even talking to someone, I went to a party yesterday and there was a spiritual teacher there, and we kicked it off, and she's much older than me, and I think she's in her 60s or something like that. Very sweet, lovely lady. And she was like, yeah, all of a sudden, I don't know, this new generation has so much trauma. And I said to her, it's not that all of a sudden we have more trauma, it's that actually we're actually more willing to talk about it. It doesn't have such a stigma anymore. And so there was always trauma before. Definitely there's generational trauma, there's religious trauma, there's so much that's been passed down to us, this genealogical trauma. But it's coming out in the surface. So the addict really is someone, or someone that has an addiction, I should say, actually gets to wake up the family and to start looking at all of this. And then it's like a blessing, actually. It's the person that ends up triggering the family to healing. So I think instead of looking at it as a problem, we look at it as like, oh, it's exciting. We can grow as a family and heal and break these generational cycles for the generations to come. We want the best for our grandkids, the best for our great grandkids. This is great that it's all coming to the surface.
Oh, I absolutely love the way you just reframed addiction and this, these dynamics and how they need to change. I would like to ask you, in the change from discovering the addiction and then the moment when they say, well, this actually could be a good thing for us as a family, how can we get rid of those feelings, those emotions of shame and say, well, this can be a good thing? Also in line with the name of the podcast, Forgive and Thrive, which for me, in my personal, this is very personal, came almost as a roadmap. I had to forgive not just others, but myself in order to go back and thrive again. And I would like to ask you about forgiveness if you have any thoughts. And it's something that can really help in that journey out of addiction and to recreate good dynamics within families.
Yeah, so firstly, obviously, we've got to work with our emotions. We don't want to converse or start the conversations when we're highly emotional, because as you know, when we're emotional, we don't always make the best decisions. So it's always about processing the initial shock, having some time on our own to lower the emotional reaction before we can have a discussion. Otherwise, they will get defensive straight away and shut down. So that's really important. And how I would approach it is, I'm so sorry that you couldn't tell me about this. I'm so sorry that I wasn't a safe enough space for you to feel like you could tell me what was going on, or that you could tell me the pain or hurt that you've been experiencing and you've had to cope with it on your own, alone. And so I'm here with you now, and I want to let you know that yes, I'm in shock, but I'm going to do the best that I can to be an open ear for you, an open heart. I do have some boundaries that I'm just working through that I'm happy to share with you. Um, and the main thing here, Rosanna, the main thing that I want to get across is that it's not about you and it's not because of you. And there's no amount of guilting and shaming that you do that will stop them, because they're just trying to feel okay. And so, for example, if I was to have a partner and I would say we've got little children, and as I do have a child with my partner, who is an ex addict, by the way, if all of a sudden one day I find out that he's using again or something like that. So the first thought that people have is, am I not good enough for you to, am I not good enough? Like, why are you doing this to us? How could you do this to us? You know, is there like, do I need to be better? Why are you like, and the guilt and the shame, how can you do this to me? How can they're not doing it to you? They just don't know how to cope. They haven't been taught the emotional regulation tools, how to handle their emotions, or they've got so much bottled up trauma. They just really need to start processing it and getting therapy and getting it out. It's not actually about your value as a person. It's not about your value as a family, although you do need to own where there has been toxicity or not communication enough, or, you know, and it's also not your fault because maybe your parents didn't give you emotional support, and there's this generational not pushing everything under the rug, pushing everything down, pretending we're okay. Right. So it's not, it's again, it's a trigger, it's an amazing opportunity for us. And you don't need to forgive straight away. You're allowed to be hurt. Let yourself feel hurt. Don't try and push it down. But when you're communicating with them, don't expect them to go, oh, yes, I love you so much that I'm going to stop. That's not going to happen. It's not about you and how much they love you. Actually, they're probably just trying to use the drugs to feel okay so they can love you or show that they love you, so because they're feeling good, right? Yeah.
Being very understanding. I absolutely love what you're saying. Melissa, I'm aware of the time and I would like to come back on you before concluding this lovely conversation. Is there anything at all that you would like to share with us about, I don't know, courses perhaps with the center, anything else that you are planning for 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I started the Center for Healing with my now partner, who I helped him with his addiction. So we had the clinic for 5 years, and then we moved to the online space after we had our son. And now we, as you said at the start, train practitioners. But one of the things we did create not long after we closed the center was a course called Support for Families of Addicts, or those with addictions. So it's a short course. It's very affordable. I'm sure you'll put the link in the show notes below, or if you go to the centerforhealing.com, you'll find it. It's created by Ryan, who's my partner, who had the and he grew up in his family's amazing. They're beautiful people. I don't know, like but there was things that weren't known, and anxieties that weren't known that the parents weren't aware of that caused his addictions. And he created it with Matt. So Matt is one of his friends, but he went to rehab 17 times. And it wasn't until he started doing the trauma healing and this work that we offer that he actually overcame that. So they are now therapists, have been therapists for many years. We ran the addiction center. And so that course is from the addict's perspective of what best to do as a family member to help your loved one the best that you can with recovery. And it's going to be your own journey as well. So that would be the main place I'll point them to. We also have a practitioner directory if you want to get one-on-one healing and therapy, or you want to have some options to send to your loved one when they're ready and open to get help. you can send some rehabs and you can send some one-on-ones and things like that. Just making sure whatever they go to, it's not a shame-based, if you relapse one day, you've got to start from day one kind of thing. Or that you don't rush and just join free groups on Facebook that just whinge about how hard it is, right? We don't want to come in with that vibe. We want to come in with the healing vibe. So we have a lot of free courses as well on understanding trauma. Just anything that we've been able to contribute to help people on their journey. And then I've also written a book as well called The Natural High, which explains in depth about how I helped my partner with his addiction and also how I overcame my own addictions and clients as well, and to start the healing journey. So that's on the website as well.
Fantastic. As always, we will put all the links in the description of today's episode. Melissa, very final question. If there was one take-home message that you would love everybody to remember from this conversation, what that would be?
I want you to remember that we are all just trying to feel okay, and that includes you, and that includes the person with the addiction. So if you keep that in mind, you'll be able to forgive and grow together.
Wow, that is absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Well, as we reach the end of this episode, it's clear to me that the journey through addiction is one of immense complexity and emotion. Addiction has the power to reshape lives and redefine relationships. Yet within this struggle, we can uncover examples of strength and resilience and the unwavering power of love within families. And on this note, I want to leave you with a quote from Michael J. Fox, who said, "Family is not an important thing, it's everything." Melissa, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, for sharing so much about your personal story and what you do and your mission with us. Thank you so much. I really love this conversation.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor.
Thank you. Well, if you or someone you know is grappling with addiction, please remember help is available. Reach out to local resources, support groups, professionals who can guide you on the path to recovery. You are not alone, and every step forward is a triumph worth celebrating. And if you are instead supporting a loved one through their journey out of addiction, remember that your resilience is a beacon of hope. Stay resilient. Your commitment and understanding can be the catalyst that guides them out of the shadows of addiction. And I'm sure you can find plenty of inspiration from our conversation with Melissa. And if you need extra help, don't forget to check Melissa's website, her work, and follow her on social media. You will find all the links in the description of today's episode. Finally, if you have been affected in any way by the topic we discussed today, as always, I invite you to seek professional help. Join me next time when we will continue exploring inspiring and challenging situations, because remember, we are together in this journey. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell and like this video. See you in the next one.